Boker Tov, good morning, everyone. Good to be with you here. And look at all those wonderful people I get to start this morning with. I'm so lucky to be able to be with you as we continue our counting of the Omer. And as we do each morning, as is our tradition, we begin with a prayer of gratitude for this beautiful day ahead of us. Before you, living and enduring sovereign. You have mercifully restored my soul within me. Great is your faithfulness. Now, over the past 3 weeks, we have been waking up and attuning ourselves to our world. We have been setting out on the journey just like the Israelites did long ago, entering the wilderness. And today we will begin our 4th week of being in the unknown. So, before we dive in, let us, of course, offer our Omer Prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat haomer. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with mitzvot and commands us concerning the counting of the Omer. Hayom Shneim Bisrim Shehem, excuse me, do that again. Hayom Shnayim Vesrim Yom Shehem Shlosha Shavuot V'Yom Echad LaOmer. Today is 22 days, which is 3 weeks and 1 day of the Omer. So this is our very first day in the 4th week. And before we dive into our teaching, let me just welcome all of you for being here. We have to have Rabbi Romper room time, right? So I just want to give a good morning to Sarah Gill. It's great to see you before school. And Riva, Don, and Diane, and George. So good to see you. Jay and Donnie. Carrie, good morning to you too. Michelle Shehan, Boker Tov, happy Monday. And Pam Tarlow, good to see you. Cheryl Holtzman, good to see you. So glad you finished getting your second shot. Eve, good to see you. Good morning. And Tina and Lynn and Elliot and Susan and Rabbi Catherine. It is such a pleasure to be here with every single one of you and everyone else who is here. Thank you. Thank you for creating this sacred community. So there's something that is a useful tool for rabbis and for Torah scholars that's called the Concordance. And essentially, there's a practice of taking a word that appears in the Torah or a tradition and looking it up to see how many times and exactly where it occurs within our Torah. Because sometimes looking at it in one place can give us insight into how it's meant to be understood in another. And so I decided to spend some good quality catching up time with my concordance and look up the word midbar. Midbar, of course, as we know, means wilderness or desert. And it appears hundreds of times in the Torah, over 300 times in the entire Torah. But I looked it up to see where it occurred in the book of Genesis before the Exodus itself. Because as you can imagine, as they're wandering through the desert for 40 years, it's very likely that that word is used many, many times throughout the books of Exodus and on. So I went to look up exactly where it was used in the book of Genesis. And what I discovered is that the word, it actually appears 11 times, but 4 of those times are connected to a different word. It's not used in this context. So really it appears just 7 times. And 2 of those times are in relation to other nations and their exploits. One of those times is this verse right here that, of course, will eventually relate to the Exodus story. And I put Exodus down on the bottom, but that actually should read Genesis. So excuse me, I made a mistake down there, I realize now. But the verse reads, "And Reuben went on, shed no blood, cast him into that pit out in the wilderness, but do not touch him yourselves, intending to save him from them and restore him to his father." So what's going on at this particular moment? Well, Joseph's brother saw him approaching with his beautiful Technicolor Dreamcoat, if we go by the play and how they interpret that. And they are angry at him because he's too boastful, because he's the father's favorite, because of all sorts of reasons. And they are thinking about what it is that they want to do with him, whether they should kill him, whether they should sell him into slavery, and they end up casting him into a pit. And it's at this moment when his own brothers are talking about and decide to cast him into a pit in the wilderness because it's a better alternative than slaughtering him, that this word comes up. So what does midbar mean in this context? Well, it really means one of the scariest moments of Joseph's life, because here he is and everything is outside of his hands. He is thrown into the complete unknown in the worst possible way. And that is the context in which this word shows up in Genesis. What's really interesting that I came across, though, is that there are 4 more times that this word appears in Genesis, and all 4 of them relate to Hagar and Ishmael. So 2 of them are right here. The first one, "An angel of the Eternal found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the road to Shur." So what's going on here? Well, Sarah was having a really, really tough time with Hagar having a child, and is really cruel to her. And is so cruel to her, in fact, that she decides to go out into the wilderness, and God ends up asking her, please, to return, and she does. So what's going on in this text? Well, Hagar also feels that everything is out of her hands. Everything is unknown and uncomfortable in the worst possible way. Of course, when we go to the next text, it's even more so. So early the next morning, Abraham took some bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. So at this point, Sarah has said that she wants Hagar and Ishmael to leave because she's just had her son Isaac, and she wants her son basically to be in the position as the heir. And since Ishmael was technically the firstborn son to Abraham, there's a lot of fear and jealousy and just difficulty going on here. So what happens? Something where Hagar is about to be sent out by Abraham into the wilderness. He placed these items, this water and bread, over Hagar's shoulder together with the child Ishmael, and sent her away, and she wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. Just a couple verses later, these are the two other times the word wilderness shows up, or the word midbar, as you can see in this text. God was with the boy. Okay, so what's happening here? So there's this moment that Hagar is in the wilderness, is afraid that perhaps they will not make it. They're both in the desert, right? They're in the wilderness. There's not a lot of water. There is a lot of heat, and they're not doing all that well. And Ishmael is lying there, and he is really in a bad way. And Hagar is calling out in prayer. And God says to Hagar, open your eyes, there are water right before you. And lo and behold, Hagar finds some water in order to sustain Ishmael. And Ishmael has the water, is restored, and is able to live his life. A few verses later, this is where we come. God was with the boy, and he grew up. He dwelt in the wilderness and became a bowman. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife from him from the land of Egypt. The wilderness, as it appears in these early texts, and this should say Genesis as well. Sorry, I was thinking so much about the Exodus story that I got a little excited. But this wilderness can be such a scary place because it's filled with unknowns. Because they didn't know if they would live. They didn't know what their lives would be. They didn't know if they would be okay. And yet in this wilderness, that's where Ishmael is able to find his strength, is able to find himself, and is able to start his life filled with blessings. Indeed, so much of this portion right here is it talks about and explains the many blessings that Ishmael will have as the father of a great nation as well. This week, we are talking about being in the unknown, truly an uncomfortable place, sometimes even a scary place. But throughout this week, we'll also talk about the many ways in which Midbar, this unknown, can be a place of growth and a place of birth. And so I look forward to exploring all of this with you in this next week. Well, that's for tomorrow. So, okay. Each day, I try to have a question that we can focus on. And the question for today is, when have you been in the realm of the unknown? And what was especially challenging for you about being in this place of the unknown? So I invite you to spend some time thinking or journaling on that. And this morning, as we do each morning, I'd like us to conclude with a prayer for healing. Healing for everyone in our hearts, maybe healing for ourselves. If you feel comfortable, you can write the name in the chat of anyone for whom you'd like to say this Misha Berach prayer. And we hope that people feel our healing words, and that we, in saying these words, feel compelled to do a bit more to offer support to all those who truly need it. I invite you to join with me in singing Lisa Levine's Misha Berach. Misha Berach Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Misha Berach Imotenu, Zara, Rivka, Leah, v'Rachel. May the one who blessed our mothers, may the one who blessed our fathers, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, and bless us as well. Bless us with the power of your healing. Bless us with the power of your home. May our hearts be filled with understanding and strengthened by the power of your love. Misha Berach Avotenu, Berachimotenu. Hear our prayer. Hear our prayer. Hear our prayer. Hear our prayer and bless us as well. Hear our prayer. Hear our prayer. Hear our prayer. Hear our prayer and bless us as well. I hope everyone has a wonderful Monday. It is going to be a gorgeous day, so I hope that we all can spend some time outside, even if it's just opening a window and sticking our head out. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow as we continue this counting of the Omer.